Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio, and I know you guys have read the title before clicking on this video, and I think the majority of you can probably agree with me at this point that Marvel's Eternals at this point is really a chink in the MCU's armor. And we are going to be going through a multitude of fucking articles here, and we're going to be going through a multitude of them for a reason that I will get to later on. Starting with this first one that came out on the 9th of November, that is Eternals didn't dazzle at the box office, but Marvel shouldn't be worried. And I'm going to say right off the bat, I'm going to agree to a degree. You know, that Marvel really, they shouldn't be worried right now. But if you have more Eternals keep coming out, then you should be getting worried. But let's go ahead and let's dive into this. Disney superhero adventure Eternals debuted to $71 million at the domestic box office, a tally that would typically be labeled a disappointment in the blockbuster Marvel Cinematic Universe. Marvel movies rarely miss at the box office. All 26 movies have opened at #1 in North America, and many recent installments pre-pandemic, of course, have ultimately glided by the $1 billion mark globally with ease. Box office observers and comic book superfans have come to expect the franchise's entries to generate more than $100 million in their opening weekends. Anything less by Marvel standards tends to be classified as a misstep. In that company, Eternals isn't quite stacking up at the box office. The big budget adaptation, featuring an ensemble cast of Angelina Jolie, Gemma Chan, Salma Hayek, Richard Madden, and Kit Harington, notched one of the worst opening weekends in the MCU, including the pandemic-era releases Black Widow at $80 million plus $60 million on Disney+. So again, it grossed less money. Eternals grossed less money than an MCU entry that was available day and date. That is rather sad. And Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings at $75 million, that was in the first 3 days, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it crossed up to $95 million if you included Labor Day itself. In pandemic times, though, it's a solid start. Eternals landed the fourth best launch behind Venom Let There Be Carnage at $90 million, Black Widow and Shang-Chi. So while $71 million may be lackluster compared to other MCU entries, Eternals has sold more tickets in 3 days than nearly every film released this year made in their entire theatrical runs. Wait a minute, what? What? Eternals has sold more tickets in 3 days than nearly every film released this year made in their entire theatrical runs. How did Shang-Chi get up to $95 million over 4 days? Okay, this logic has really got my fucking head turning. So I'm gonna move on because I'm not gonna stay stumped on this for like five fucking minutes, but my head's about to hurt. Quote, it's below Marvel's remarkable average for launching a new series, but we are still in thin air at the top of theatrical business, says David A. Gross, who runs the movie consulting firm Franchise and Entertainment Research. The movie is a creative departure for Marvel. Different is good when it keeps it fresh, but it can also shake the fan base. That's a good point. If you're just different for the sake of being different, that's not a good idea for being different. But notice this first part right here. It's below Marvel's remarkable average for launching a new series. Notice that point right there, a new series. Have any of these characters been introduced at all in the MCU? No, they fucking haven't. And in fact, in the first Eternals video that I made, it was even noted that the Eternals, when the comic released, was really divisive at the time. So, divisive comic, divisive movie. You know, it's, a like father, like son type thing. Since Eternals premiered in the same year as 3 new Marvel-centric television series on Disney+, here we go. I knew these were going to be blamed. WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki, in addition to 2 other big screen feature films in Shang-Chi and Black Widow, it would be easy to attribute the box office results as a larger sign that audiences are starting to grow tired of all things superhero. There's no denying that comic book fare on the big and small screen alike is more prevalent than ever. In the case of Eternals, however, it doesn't signal that franchise fatigue has come to plague Marvel once and for all. Quote, Eternals had very unique challenges in that outside of Angelina Jolie, it didn't have any big-name stars, said Jeff Bach, an analyst with exhibitor relations. It's not like Marvel is taking a dip. They ran into a series of heroes that absolutely nobody had heard of. Okay, hold on. It didn't have any big-name stars. Chris Evans was not a big name star before Captain America: The First Avenger. Okay, he was a guy that was around, and most people probably knew him as the Human Torch in the 2005 Fantastic Four movie and the sequel Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, but Chris Evans wasn't a big name. Chris Hemsworth wasn't a huge name before Thor, and Robert Downey Jr., while a big name actor in the 90s, most people only know Robert Downey Jr. for two things: Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and his very infamous drug addiction that landed him in prison quite a bit. In fact, Terrence Howard, the sidekick, Rhodey in the first Iron Man movie, made more money than the main hero, made more money than Robert Downey Jr., because Robert Downey Jr. at that time was deemed as a risk. So don't give me this cockamamie fucking bullshit answer of, oh, it didn't have any big name stars. A lot of these stars weren't big names. Okay, let's expand a little further with Chris Pratt. Other than Parks and Rec, you know, he didn't really do much. Zoe Saldana, she was around. Biggest movie I can think of that she did was Avatar, but nobody ever saw her face. Then she did The Losers, which wasn't a bad movie, but a lot of people didn't see that. What's next? Chris Evans was also in that movie too, ironically. Who else was in it? You had Vin Diesel, but again, his only line in the movie is "I am Groot." You have Dave Bautista, who was more known as a wrestler. And I feel like, oh, you know, you also had Bradley Cooper. Okay, Bradley Cooper was a pretty big name, but still, he was probably the only big name in Guardians of the Galaxy. So sorry, it's a cockamamie bullshit answer. Eternals didn't fall short of Marvel's stratospheric box office expectations because moviegoers are worn down by spandex heroes. Rather, it's because the film didn't resonate with audiences in the same way that prior entries in the popular series have. Reviews for Eternals, directed by Oscar winner Chloe Zhao, has been far less enthusiastic than other MCU titles, and it has the unfortunate distinction as the first Marvel movie to get a quote-unquote rotten score on review aggregation site Rotten Tomatoes. Audiences were similarly mixed. It's the only Marvel movie to receive a B cinema score. The first Thor landed a B+ rating, while the remaining 24 movies have fallen into the A range. Given the lukewarm reception, the decline in ticket sales between its first and second weekend in theaters will reflect the degree to which word of mouth can affect Marvel at the box office. Tepid reviews could mean the film drops substantially in its sophomore outing. Shang-Chi didn't have an exponentially better start than Eternals, but the well-received tentpole had held steady in subsequent weeks, propelling box office revenues to $223 million, the most of any movie this year. It remains to be seen how Eternals will stack up to Shang-Chi and Black Widow, but nonetheless it will easily rank among the top 10 highest-grossing films of 2021. Well, yeah, and guess what? That top 10 highest-grossing films of 2021 is going to come with an asterisk in a couple of years. Eternals sets up the future of Marvel in a post-Avengers Endgame world, one in which Tony Stark and Steve Rogers bid farewell to Earth's mightiest heroes. And remember, it was originally supposed to be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was originally going to set up Eternals before James Gunn got shit-canned and the movie got pushed back. So maybe Eternals failed because they skipped the setup. You know, that could be another reason. A big challenge in Zhao's film was getting audiences to care about several new characters who weren't as ubiquitous as Spider-Man or Black Panther. Okay, Spider-Man was already a popular character. He was going to have no problem. Black Panther wasn't even a B-list character. And the only reason why people cared about Black Panther was because they set him up in Captain America Civil War. You know, that's really it. Black Panther was not a popular character prior to the fucking MCU. That isn't a problem for Marvel's upcoming slate in 2022 and 2023, which feature characters who have become household names, including Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, Thor: Love and Thunder, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, The Marvels, and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Marvel may not have to wait long for its next box office smash. Box office analysts believe Spider-Man No Way Home, which Marvel Studios co-produced with Sony, could be the first pandemic release to cross $100 million in its box office debut on December 17th. The third Spider-Man movie to feature Tom Holland as the web-slinging hero looks poised to be a commercial triumph. That remains to be seen, because if I'm not mistaken, I think they believe that Eternals would be the same thing, and well, look at the results. Especially because trailers for the superhero epic have teased the tantalizing promise of a multiverse, an alternate reality that allows multiple generations of Spider-Man actors to appear in the same movie. That means past Spidey's Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, as well as villains like Alfred Molina's Doc Ock and Jamie Foxx's Electro, may appear alongside Holland. Quote, even before the pandemic, Shang-Chi and Eternals were considered outside the event Marvel movies we got used to. Sean Robbins, the chief analyst at Box Office Pro, says in reference to Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man Far From Home, the last 3 MCU movies to hit theaters prior to COVID-19. Quote, once we get to Doctor Strange, Thor, and Black Panther, those are the heavy hitters. Or as Bach puts it, Marvel's upcoming slate has characters we all know and love dearly. Those films will be just fine. Again, that remains to be seen. I don't think it's box office fatigue. I think, simply put it, Eternals came up without the setup of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So now let's jump forward to this, Variety VIP and what Eternals means for the future of Marvel. Now, this could be rather interesting. Disney's pandemic theatrical hot streak continues following the release of Marvel's Eternals over the weekend, which net 71 million at domestic box office, blah, blah, blah. Disney's 19th film set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Eternals' success is no major shock to the system. If this was any pre-pandemic trend likely to roar back to life following the widespread shutdown of cinemas due to COVID, it was certainly the MCU's domination of theaters, and with the top 4 film openings of the pandemic tied to Marvel properties, that's already transpired. But Eternals is fairly unique within the Disney MCU canon, an ensemble film that introduces 10 heroes to the franchise in one fell swoop who haven't appeared in prior MCU films. It also hails from writer and director Chloe Zhao, who took on Best Picture and Director at the 2021 Oscars for Nomadland, an art house film about modern American nomads in the desert whose star Frances McDormand won Best Actress as well. Both these aspects have lent themselves well to marketing Eternals. Still, the film is the lowest regarded MCU film from Disney among critics to date, per review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes. But you know what hasn't helped Eternals? The fact that it's probably banned in China. Let's be 100% honest. With a franchise as robust as the MCU, it's tough to determine if reviews really matter much now. That's a bullshit excuse for a movie that is this divisive. Before the last 2 Avengers installments of 2018 and 2019 cemented Disney as box office leaders for these times, there were noticeable impacts tied to critical reception. 2013's Thor: The Dark World was once Rotten Tomatoes' lowest scoring MCU film from Disney and had a more muted opening to show for it. Then Taika Waititi, known at the time for well-praised films like Hunt for the Wilder People and oh shit, I've been talking for a while. And What We Do in the Shadows, was tapped to help 2017's Thor Ragnarok, which received rave reviews and opened more than 40% higher than Dark World. Then there's Black Panther. Other first-time MCU entrants like Guardians of the Galaxy and Doctor Strange saw modest openings amid high praise, but 2018's Black Panther remains both the most well-received MCU film and the only such entry built around a single hero to open at the scale of the ensemble-driven Avengers movie. But again, Black Panther was fucking set up in Civil War. So now you're giving the cockamamie horse shit of, Black Panther is both the most well-received MCU film and the only such entry built around a single hero to open at the scale of the ensemble-driven Avengers movies. Again, Black Panther was set up prior to the Solo movie. Guardians of the Galaxy wasn't. Guardians of the Galaxy was the genuine risk. So, again, you cannot examine Black Panther in a vacuum like that. I know people want to, but you can't examine it in such a vacuum. Released in 2019, Captain Marvel bucked this trend. Despite lower critical reception, it was still a top box office earner and comes in second behind Black Panther in terms of openings for new franchise entrants after 2012's The Avengers. Bridging the gap between the last 2 Avengers films, Captain Marvel provided more background for the MCU as a whole and the big endgame finale for Avengers. No, it didn't. And you could argue Captain Marvel only made as much money as it did because people thought that it was necessary viewing for Endgame. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. You could skip Captain Marvel and go directly to Avengers Endgame and you won't miss a damn thing, because she is pretty much edited out of that movie. You don't need to see Captain Marvel before Avengers Endgame. Let's be incredibly honest. Captain Marvel made as much money as it did based on the goodwill alone. So it's gonna be rather interesting if the Marvels is gonna do well. And notice that originally was Captain Marvel 2, and now they rebranded it as the Marvels. So shows that Disney and Marvel Studios don't necessarily have a lot of faith that Captain Marvel 2 is going to really do well, if you ask me personally. Even though Captain Marvel wasn't that bad of a movie, but still. Superhero movies generally play well to filmgoers seeking big budget action, but the fabric of the MCU is knit around continuity conscious fans who stay on top of all the franchise entries, be they theatrical tentpoles or Disney Plus series. But the problem with the continuity of the MCU is it's like Swiss cheese at this point. It's so full of holes that it's not even really worth, trying to keep up with. Let's just be 100% honest about that. With Eternals, Disney now has a weekend's worth of survey and social media analytics to sift through with regard to the film's 10 titular Eternals. Perhaps star Richard Madden regains some momentum from his Game of Thrones days and is a subject in mind alongside co-star Gemma Chan for a similar filmic follow-up, or Kumail Nanjiani's turn as in-film Bollywood favorite Kingo gets such treatment. Likewise, if audiences responded well enough to the chemistry between Brian Tyree Henry's Fastos and the character's husband, a Disney Plus series focusing on their domestic life could be in store. As for the Eternals, there's nothing stopping Disney from placing them in supporting roles spread among its upcoming slate of MCU films and series. Some may have seen the critical reception to Eternals and decided to skip it, but that could end up scratching their heads in confusion when every character from this film shows up in other films and series. And here's where, and I hate to use the term shilling, but here's where that pretty much starts. It's like, well, you should watch this movie, otherwise it's gonna scratch your head as to who these characters are. Isn't that the problem with the Eternals movie in the first place, is that nobody knows who the hell they are? So you should just go see it. That way you could avoid a potential head scratcher coming just a couple of years. As such, Eternals is primarily a bum rush injection of characters to a franchise that is still figuring out the right combination of leading characters to set the path forward after the core Avengers cast was disassembled in 2019. But remember, guys, you should go see this movie about characters you don't know about, so you could avoid that head scratcher in just a couple of years. With the Disney Plus Day showcase set for Friday, don't be surprised if Marvel has already jumped the gun and plotted out such a canonical future for its newest batch of heroes, which they could easily walk back if they really, really wanted to. And now let's jump over to this third article, again from Variety, coming out November 11th. So that would be, as of the uploading of this video yesterday, November 11th, 2021. With everyone fighting over Eternals, what's next for Marvel's future? God damn! I mean, this is the third article in like the span of 3 days. Talking about Eternals. So it must truly be fucking divisive. Oh, we have to have the obligatory spoiler warning. Who fucking cares? I wasn't gonna go out of my way to see this movie anyway. Eternals was always meant to shake things up, and there's the fucking defense. Movie is divisive. Well, it was always meant to be divisive. This is a poor man's excuse for, this movie was always meant to be divisive because it's constantly misunderstood, man. Referencing like the fucking emo kid. Yeah, man. When Chloe Zhao first met with Marvel Studios about the possibility of directing the film, she was told from the start by the company's executives that Eternals was seen internally as a reset button for the Marvel Cinematic Universe after the conclusive events of 2019's Avengers Endgame. Was that before or after you delayed Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? Because originally it was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was going to set up the MCU post-Endgame, but you decided to push that out and rush Eternals without the setup because we want to make an Eternals movie. Oh, shit. It would be a way to cleanse the studio's storytelling palette from the Infinity Saga and set up the next decade of MCU narrative possibilities. Again, you could have done this with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, but surprise, surprise, you're going to have to reset the continuity because you can't keep the same continuity going for 20 years and expecting it to hold up. In fact, I could do a whole fucking video on, how the MCU was always destined to crumble. you know, I hate to break this to you, MCU fanboys, but this gravy train wasn't gonna fucking last, and there's a number of reasons for it. That if I were to go into here, would make this video a lot longer than it probably will end up being. While characters in Eternals do mention other Marvel luminaries, Thanos, Iron Man, Steve Rogers, etc., no one from the previous 25 feature films in the MCU makes an appearance. The first time that's ever happened in the MCU, even Doctor Strange includes Thor in its post-credit scene. It's as close to a clean slate as an MCU movie has ever been. Quote, "That was Marvel's hope, you know," Zhao told Variety the day after the film's world premiere in October. "From the beginning, they told me that this film will explore the origin of the MCU, therefore redefining a lot of things. It will have repercussions to the future of the MCU. Divisive critically and less than stellar commercially, it's fair to say that Eternals has indeed made quite an impact for Marvel Studios, if not quite like the company intended, but let's not overstate things. Why else would Marvel hire a filmmaker with as singular a creative vision as Zhao to tell a story that rewrites no less than the origins of human civilization and the universe itself, if not to shake up what a Marvel movie can be? Again, it was always meant to be divisive. It was always meant to be misunderstood, bruh." On a basic level, Eternals does set the stage for a cataclysmic event for the MCU at some point in its future. The Eternals, led by Cersei, Gemma Chan, stop a new Celestial from emerging within the Earth and destroying the entire planet. Arishem, David K., the led Celestial, subsequently appears looming over the Earth, pulls Cersei, Phastos, Brian Tyree Henry, and Kingo Kumail Nanjiani into space, and announces that he will judge the fate of the entire planet on their experiences with humanity. One would expect that, say, Bruce Banner, Doctor Strange, and the leaders of Wakanda will have some opinions about the giant, petrified corpse of a Celestial poking out of the Indian Ocean, let alone a planet-sized god suddenly zapping into orbit and then just suddenly zapping away. It's unclear whether Arishem's threat to destroy the Earth was heard only by the Eternals or the entire planet, but either way, that's kind of high-stakes storytelling the MCU thrives on. Really? Because I basically heard that that there was no real villain in the Eternals, and it's like, well, that's one of your major problems there if you don't have a villain. But Eternals as a film and as a critical and social media lightning rod poses an even more intriguing and existential question about the future of the MCU. How will its titles tell those stories? Since its earliest days, Marvel Studios has earned a reputation, fairly or not, for sanding down its filmmakers' singular voices to fit inside its cohesive cinematic universe, typified by the lasting sting of Martin Scorsese's pronouncements in 2019 that Marvel movies are not cinema, and he had a point. It's true that other filmmakers, especially James Gunn with the two Guardians of the Galaxy movies and Taika Waititi with Thor Ragnarok, have brought more idiosyncratic filmmaking voices to the MCU. But Eternals feels like an active reboot against Marvel's image as a superhero factory. The studio hired Zhao specifically so she would infuse Eternals with an aesthetic and narrative sensibility that stood apart from the rest of the studio's output to date. But the problem is, if you have no real villain, then there's no point to your movie. It's sort of a National Geographic approach, Zhao told Variety. It doesn't do this crazy thing. It just shows you what it is, and then you immerse. This appears to have been a happy collaboration. Marvel Studios chief Kevin Feige even half-joked to Variety in April that he hoped to be talking up Eternals as an Oscar contender following Zhao's Best Picture and Director wins for Nomadland. Well, those dreams are pretty much good and fucking dead. Feige could probably keep his tuxedo in storage. Fans and critics alike have found Eternals to be uneasy, even off-putting mix. Not quite the MCU, not quite Zhao, and have had no problem expressing their displeasure all over the internet. The reaction has effectively called out Marvel for doing the thing everyone seemed to want them to do, give an A-list filmmaker... is Chloe Zhao really an A-list filmmaker? Let's be 100% honest. Kenneth Branagh is more of an A-list filmmaker than Chloe Zhao is. Give an A-list filmmaker greater leeway to make an MCU movie their way. Well, Kenneth Branagh did that with Thor, and it worked out quite well. I don't care what that bullshit cinema score is. The first Thor movie was quite good. So will Marvel do it again? The company's slate is already scheduled for the next 2 years, from Waititi's Thor Love and Thunder, due July 2022. Whoops! Which just wrapped, to Peyton Reed's Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, due July 2023, which is already in production. So any fallout from Eternals won't be evident until the fall of 2023, and whomever is announced to direct Marvel's as yet announced next slate of movies. It's also worth underlining that 1, Marvel wanted Eternals to be different, and 2, Marvel chose Eternals as the film to be different. Yeah, bruh. It was always meant to be misunderstood, bruh. Created by Jack Kirby in a limited run in the 1970s, I believe it was a 19-issue miniseries. The Eternals was never central to the great Marvel Comics narrative. Sure, the title's origin story for the universe has reverberated throughout the Marvel canon, but as a limited, carved-out narrative many comics fans were free to outright ignore, and again, Zhao knew this going in. Quote, "We get to really play and make a standalone movie, which I think is a tribute to Jack Kirby," she said in October. "If you think about Jack Kirby's Eternals run, it was created very much on the periphery of these really popular characters. He was telling stories about something so much bigger through this little group of outcasts." But again, the Eternals, when they came out in the 70s, was highly divisive. So, divisive comic, divisive movie. Go fucking figure. Just compare Eternals to the next film in the MCU, Spider-Man No Way Home. Debuting in just over a month, No Way Home is widely expected to be the highest grossing film of the year, and is the first pandemic-era release to open with over $100 million domestically. That is what they're hoping for. That is not a confirmation. Co-produced with Sony Pictures, No Way Home also promises to remake not just the MCU, but Sony's growing suite of Marvel adaptations by unleashing the looser narrative constraints of the multiverse. In fact, no matter how Eternals changes the MCU, the multiverse introduced by the recent Disney Plus series Loki and What If, more Loki, already has by opening up an infinite number of possibility strands to explore and paving the way for versions of Tom Holland's Peter Parker to exist within the MCU and Sony's separate Marvelverse. So could we potentially see characters from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse even pop in? You know, like Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Ham, Spider-Gwen, I think was in it, yeah. So maybe we could see that too, but again, I'm also a person not to get my hopes up. Also, not to put too fine a point on this, but while John Watts has proven to be a lively director for Holland's Spider-Man films, his previous output, including the indie films Clown and Cop Car and video shorts for The Onion, had not established him as a unique cinematic voice. If anything, Watts is far more of what most Marvel Studios observers think of when they talk about Marvel's quote-unquote house style, a highly effective and competent craftsperson who disappears into their movies. Not coincidentally, since his inception in 1962, Spider-Man has lived at Marvel's very center, so it would stand to reason that Marvel and Sony wouldn't want to take a big, risky swing with such a valuable character. And yet, Sony did just that with 2002 Spider-Man, directed by Sam Raimi, a horror auteur with an unmistakable style honed over the years as a no-budget indie filmmaker. Raimi brought his sensibility whole cloth to Spider-Man and its 2004 sequel, which is still widely considered one of the best comic book movies ever made. By 2007's bloated Spider-Man 3, however, studio demands and commercial considerations had drained away much of Raimi's voice. The movie made more money than any Spidey film before it at $895 million, but it was widely derided as an embarrassment, and Raimi left the franchise. That prompted the reboot with Andrew Garfield and director Mark Webb, which suffered from the same sense of bloat and creative anonymity, which ultimately drove Sony to its unprecedented partnership to make Spider-Man movies with Marvel Studios. Meanwhile, Marvel Studios' follow-up to Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, is directed by, yes, Sam Raimi. Much like with Chloe Zhao, it's hard to imagine why Marvel would hire Raimi and not want him to do his thing. We'll know soon enough. The film has wrapped and is currently scheduled to be in May 2022. Again, I think Sam Raimi will have much more success than Chloe Zhao will, just simply because Sam Raimi is more proven than she was. You know, let's be 100% honest. So, you know, should Marvel really be concerned right now in the moment? Well, not really, because news just broke a day ago that the MCU movie franchise just passed the $9 billion mark at the US box office. with the release of the Eternals movie last week, the week prior, the Marvel Cinematic Universe officially grosses over $9 billion in the US alone. So, safe to say the MCU is a hit for right now, but it could still very easily fall off the rails. We don't know. Hence why I'm making the claim that the Eternals is finally a chink in the MCU armor, but how big of a chink is it going to be? Again, we're gonna have to, time will tell with that one. And finally, we get to this article that just broke literally today, November 12th. How Eternals' low Rotten Tomatoes score could impact future MCU movies, coming from Screenrant. Eternals earned the MCU its first Rotten score in Rotten Tomatoes after 25 fresh scores, and that could have a big impact on future MCU reviews. Eternals is the first Marvel movie to not earn a fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes, and it could have a big impact on how future MCU films are reviewed. Eternals currently stands at 47%. Wow, it got even lower. A whole 19 points lower than Thor: The Dark World, and that new franchise low point could mean a big change for the Rotten Tomatoes scores of future MCU movies. Oh no! The MCU had a perfect record on Rotten Tomatoes for the 25 movies preceding Eternals. While the 85% average is impressive, there is a clear disparity in critical opinion between the top-rated films and the movies at the bottom of the fresh range, like The Incredible Hulk and Thor: The Dark World. Reviews are all subjective, and Rotten Tomatoes is far from a perfect system, but movie studios love to use it in marketing. Certified fresh, and then the fucking moment that a movie gets a rotten score, oh my god! All of a sudden they want to hide. Oh, Rotten Tomatoes reviews aren't that important. But then next you'll see certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Oh my god, everyone should go see the movie because it's certified fucking fresh. So this doesn't mean Eternals is an inherently bad movie because of low reviews. However, Rotten Tomatoes does still play a big part in film discourse. Does it really? I don't really think so anymore, especially with the MCU's pre-Eternals perfect streak. So Eternals and any impact it has on other MCU reviews could have a big impact on how we perceive Rotten Tomatoes and vice versa. Oh no! And Eternals reviews give the MCU a new Rotten Tomatoes low point. Thanks to Eternals, the MCU has a new low point on the tomato meter, meaning future MCU movies will exist in a new context, where any comparisons made to the MCU's worst movie now mean comparing to a rotten movie instead of a fresh one. The actual sentiment of the MCU may not even change drastically, but thanks to the way Rotten Tomatoes is scored, some reviewers may mark their more mixed reviews as rotten, resulting in a drop in the MCU's average tomato meter score and potentially even more movies getting ranked as rotten. Is that really a bad thing, though? Let's be 100% honest. I truly feel that the MCU as a whole, as a franchise as a whole, has been criminally over-fucking rated. And they have been clinging on to these Rotten Tomatoes scores for so long that, I'm finally, thanking God that finally somebody, gave a good gut punch to Kevin Feige's ego. Let's be honest, his ego's kind of getting a little out of hand. Rotten Tomatoes can be fickle because it's not a true average of all review scores and instead represents what percent of reviews are rated positively, regardless of the actual individual review scores. Except we looked at actual reviews from the top critics on Rotten Tomatoes in my first Eternals video, and even the one that was actually labeled as a positive review had quite a bit of negativity in it. That means generally anything rated under 2.5 of 5 stars is reduced to a simple rotten review, and everything over 2.5 of 5 stars is a fresh review, although both 2.5 star and 3-star reviews can be designated as either fresh or rotten when critics submit them. As a result, many movies in the 60 to 70% range could easily swing into rotten territory, depending on what direction reviewers lean when designating their 2.5 star or 3-star reviews. One of the more extreme examples of the impact on Rotten Tomatoes is a movie like Joker, which has a 7.3 average review score, better than half of the movies in the MCU, yet its tomato meter score is 68%, which only ranks higher than four MCU movies. And finally, the MCU's future less fresh movies could God damn it, could flip Rotten thanks to Eternals. The MCU's pattern of review success have earned it a sort of benefit of the doubt. When Thor: The Dark World was released, it was in the wake of the successful Phase 1, where the lowest scoring movie was The Incredible Hulk, which scored 67%, largely because it was seen as an improvement on Ang Lee's Hulk movie. So since The Incredible Hulk was fresh, any reviewers who thought Thor: The Dark World was better than The Incredible Hulk might be more likely to lean fresh on their 2.5-star and 3-star reviews. Both of those movies would have fallen under the 60% threshold if 17 or 18 of their fresh reviews flipped to rotten, and they both easily have enough 2.5 and 3-star fresh reviews in that range. It's not just movies teetering on the edge of that 60% range that are at risk, although their sources are naturally the most precarious. But some movies have a highly disproportionate score to their actual reviews, such as Ant-Man, which has an 83% tomato meter score, but the average review score is 6.9 out of 10. That means there's likely a lot of reviews in that middle range scoring it low, but still good enough for a fresh score. In that case, simply dropping all the middling reviews by a mere half star could make the difference between fresh and positive, even though the movie's at 83%. It would take a lot for every future Marvel movie to suddenly start coming in rotten, so that's not likely to happen, but the quote-unquote good enough fresh scores of those more average or mediocre MCU movies make them precarious enough to be at risk. Despite Eternals' low score, few reviewers actually think it's the MCU's worst film, posing a tough context for anyone who might review future MCU movies in context to the franchise's other films. If all the films are fresh, then there's a pretty low bar to clear for a fresh review. But now with Eternals in the mix, some reviewers may see the franchise differently when it comes to scoring future movies. The MCU has a formula figured out, and the 25 fresh film streak is proof that they've effectively tapped into critics and the general audience, so the franchise will surely be mostly unimpacted by this shift, as shown by Eternals' solid opening weekend box office. That grossed lower than an MCU entry that was available day and date on Disney+. So let that one sink in. The Marvel Cinematic Universe will go forward as it always had. It just might do so with a lower Rotten Tomatoes average. And I love that people are now coming out against Rotten Tomatoes because, oh my god, the MCU no longer has fresh scores. Rotten Tomatoes bad. You know, studios will use the certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes in their fucking marketing when it benefits them, but the moment that a movie gets a rotten rating, they love to say, well, Rotten Tomatoes scores and reviews don't really matter all that much. It's like, pick a fucking side. Either it's important or it's not. It's really that simple. So, does Marvel have to worry? In the here and now, not really, no. As I said in the beginning, just because Eternals represents a chink in the armor doesn't necessarily mean that the MCU is going to die overall. However, I do think that the MCU is going to get way too big for its own good between the movies and the streaming shows. It's going to be damn near impossible to keep up. So, how big of a chink in the armor is the Eternals movie going to be? Honestly, something like that is only clear in hindsight. It's not really that clear in the moment, but I absolutely love that the MCU fanboys right now are spurging the fuck out because, oh my god, we finally have an MCU movie that didn't get a fresh rating. Cancel Rotten Tomatoes. That's the whole reason I'm making this video right now, and why it's probably damn near 40 minutes, just like my first Eternals video, nonetheless. Whoopsie on that one, but I'm way too goddamn lazy to edit all this down, so fuck it. I'm gonna leave it at the 40+ minute runtime. So pretty much my message at the end of the day is suck it, MCU fanboys. And anyway, guys, that's all I got for you. If you stuck around this long, and I know it was a really long fucking video, at damn near 40 minutes, thanks so much for doing so. And if you've been following me long enough, you know I am absolutely terrible at ending these videos, so I will just see you guys next time.